Mike Fifer with Fifer Hobby Supply. It's been quite a while since I've done a video. Gavin and I attempted to start one this morning, but the battery went dead in the camera. So we'll probably work on another one tomorrow, but today I thought I better do one. It's been a while since I've done one, so I picked another one out besides the one that Gavin and I were going to work on. They're both scenery related, but this one here is from Matthew Henard, I believe it is. And it says, "Hi Mike, I know you did a scenic break video a while back and I really learned a lot from that. I think it would be great if you did a how to plan and execute a good scene." I'm gonna do that very thing, and we're gonna use the scene that one of the first scenes that I did on the layout, and that'll be the ghost town. And I'll just tell you how it came to my head, and we'll go over how I executed it, as you say. So let's take a look at the ghost town. Okay, everybody. This is kind of basically the ghost town area. It started out being a ghost town only, and really what it was going to be was just the ghost town buildings you see up there. And actually, when it first started, if you guys had seen when I was doing this, there was no hill back there. And I started putting in the ghost town buildings, and then I just put them where I thought they looked normal on the scene. That was pretty much how the concept started. There was no foliage, nothing on this, you know, towards the camera from where the buildings are now. It evolved into having a couple of arroyos, obviously, down through it, with a couple of washed out bridges and a road in front of it. That was the second idea that I came up with, that I just thought, you know, they obviously needed a way to get to these places. And if it's going to be a ghost town, it's going to be a non-traveled road. So I made the road abandoned and the bridges burned out or knocked down. And from that point, the idea just starts evolving. There is no set way for me to tell you how to plan a scene, but I think the object is to basically start doing a scene by putting things in some place where you think they need to go, and then just build on top of that, or build, not literally on top of that, but build on top of that idea and build things out and backwards from there. So I'll go on here in a little bit. I'll take a breath, and we'll go on here to explain how some of the scenes in front and back of this evolved. Okay, we're back here looking at the same scene, of course. Over here, you can see the, right there, you can just barely see the Indian Hogan that's with the trading post over there. The trading post was a second thought, and it went in, and it's a second scene, basically, separately. And that scene included the mine over here. The mine and the Hogan and everything actually would have been separated from the original scene right here. Okay, there was nothing over there. On this side over here, there was not the hotel or the motel, and there was nothing this way. It all started out as this little scene right here. So eventually what happened, the first modification that was made to the scene was this track that you see going straight across the back here. I have an awful lot of straight track along the back side of the layout there, and I thought, geez, I really need some kind of a break in that. You know, you can't just see the train going up that whole incline there, because it just looks ridiculous to have that much exposed track. So that's when I increased the height of this hill here and made a cut behind there that the track actually passes through. And on the other side of that is the other half of the cut that goes on back to the backdrop. Later on in the creation of the backdrop was already up there, but later on in the creation of the backdrop, I added I kind of painted in a mountain that was already there and turned it into a volcano. And then I decided to add this lava flow coming down. So the lava flow came and stopped right before where the track is. Many thousands of years ago, so they built the track around the edge of the lava flow. That was the idea of that. And that pretty much kind of finished up. Of course, there was details added later on, like the yuccas and so forth, and painting and trees and that kind of stuff. But all that stuff comes later. I could even have people hiking. The water tank was one of the last things that I put in the ghost town right there. I figured, you know, an old town like that would have had some kind of, maybe if it was any kind of size of town at all, had some kind of community well. and that was actually the community well, and the water tank fed the few little houses that were there. Of course, gives the appearance that there was some other houses there that are now gone. You know, that was kind of the idea. So basically that takes care of us from the ghost town back, and how those ideas just, as I say, piled on afterwards. They were just afterthoughts that were added on afterwards. Now we'll talk about how this scene came this way. Okay, once I got the ghost town in, then I always work on my layouts. I always try and work from the back forward, and I like to do all the stuff generally like to do all the stuff in the back first and work my way out, just because that way you're not leaning over existing scenery, which only seems sensible to me, but it just doesn't occur to some folks. But nevertheless, I figured that since we had a ghost town, that you had to have some people. There's always people at a ghost town. I mean, almost always, unless it's a real old ghost town. But a modern day, if there is such a thing, kind of sounds stupid, but a modern day ghost town, there would be some holdouts, some people that were still had a reason to be there. And so I started thinking, okay, what kind of things would be at a ghost town, or something that had been a ghost town? And the ghost town would have involved the mine at one time, and probably the people that lived in the ghost town worked at the mine. We have several of those places in New Mexico where there were mines, and then there's ghost towns now, and there's people that have come back to those places and rejuvenated some of those homes and things. So my thinking here is, there's a reason for Brownie's gas station over here, because the people that hung out, Brownie's might have even been there in the very beginning. So Brownie's gas station is the little gas station over here. Then the people that are here got kind of tired, and there was nobody to fix cars besides Brownie, and Brownie didn't have an indoor shop. So he built a building next door, and he opened up a shop there. Now it's being run by his brother or someone, and so Brownie's and the repair shop are right next to each other. Then I conceived that there would have been some place for the railroad to drop off things here. So this is an old adobe type structure that was probably there in the early days, may have even been a station stop or something along the way, but is now just a little freight house that still remains there today, that they have rejuvenated a little bit. Now, every little bitty town had a post office. There's a little itty bitty post office right there. The post office has probably been there since, oh, not during the time that the ghost town was there, but since the residents are still living there. But I thought it was something that needed to be in the scene, and was added later actually to that open spot. These houses here, there was actually a mobile home here. I took it out. I didn't like the way it looked. I put a house in here, and a little welding shop back up in here. I thought, you know, these people that live here have to have something to do. So you got Brownie running the gas station. He lives in one of these houses. Then you got the guy that runs the welding shop. He may live in this house right here. So those were kind of added later. Then I thought, well, this is on an old highway here that would pass through the state. So I said, well, there's going to be new residents. So there's a new adobe house, new considering the age of some of these houses, a newer adobe house back here. And of course, every town needs a bar. So there's a relatively new bar that was built over here. Okay? The bar was actually built later on. But when I was thinking about the road here, I wound up, had this open space. I couldn't figure out what to do with it. I thought I could put, pecan trees or something in there growing or whatever. And then I thought, geez, every one of these little hole-in-the-wall places along the highway had a motel at one time. So I made the Yucca Motel there, and built it off the layout on a piece of styrene, and then wound up putting it in place there. And that was about the third or fourth thing to go in as far as scenic value stuff, areas I should say. Then after the motel went in, that's when I put in the little adobe building over here and the bar. And once I got all that stuff in on the far side of the highway, here we are working out again, then I started thinking about, well, now what do I do out this way, okay? So now we're going to dive into how the stuff that you see in the foreground here came about. Okay, once I got to the point of having the motel and all the stuff in the background here on the other side of the tracks, I thought, well, we need something out here on the front. Couldn't figure out what to do. But I started looking around the layout, and I thought the rest of the layout was getting a little too crowded looking with buildings and things, which I still think it is. And Gavin and I have a plan, but that'll be discussed later on. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll put a road coming in from nowhere that tees into the small secondary highway here. So this highway was built across the tracks here. The crossing gates were put in and wired up. Of course, you got to add the stop signs and everything else. And I thought, you know, what better thing to put here than a guy that comes in and tries to steal the other guy's business away by putting in a new, bigger, better gas station, right? So I decided to put in this Woodland Scenics pre-built gas station, and it's Ethel's, by the way. And so Ethel's moved in. I just thought that there needed to be a gas station on this other road. I just thought it would make sense. There really wasn't anything other than that to give me any idea to put it there. It just looked like, I mean, these things just occur to me, so I thought it just belonged there. And like I say, this area over here, I don't want to put anything in there, so I just filled it full of yuccas and so forth, because I wanted to leave the feeling of open space. Then, along with the theme of the ghost town, I put this little shed across the road here that used to be something. We don't know what it is, but it's got a bowed roof. It's leaning over, and the state has decided to bring some prisoners out to clean up the highway here. Now, you have to understand, through all this process that we've been talking about here, is none of this stuff comes to you at one shot. You just add to it as things come to your head. And that's part of the fun of this. This entire scene doesn't have to be something that I envisioned in my head. And if we go back in retrospect and look back on it, it all started with a couple little buildings like that building right there, which is basically a little European structure that I stuccoed. And then these other ones are the same, out of those same houses under construction. I think it's a Keebri kid or Fowler or somebody did it, Brawa or somebody. Anyway, just cut the roofs off of them, made them into flat roofed houses and collapsed the roofs in and stuff. But anyway, in the making of those structures, that's just what brought this whole scene to life. All these other ideas were secondary or more, you know, ideas back, you know, just as I saw fit. And really, to explain to Matt, it evolves. It evolved from 4 little buildings back, and it evolved from 4 little buildings forward, and just adding, and like layering a cake, basically. And if we were to pan the camera, which I'm not going to do, but because you guys have seen it, but if we were to pan the camera this way, you would see the beginnings of another little town over here. If I pan this way, you would see the trading post in our house over here. So even though this started out as a little 4-building scene, you can see how it evolved into a multi-building scene of about 2.5 feet wide or 3 feet wide and about 2 feet deep. So that's basically how this all comes to my head. Like I say, the key to this whole thing and this whole question in this email and this whole how-to is never try to conceive the whole thing at once. Conceive an area, put the things in there, see how they fit, and from that point, then start studying structures, start studying real life, you know, what's out there in real life. What do you want to see? Do you want, like Pele Soberg, do you want the scenery open with no structures? Do you want structures? Do you want an industry next to the track? Do you not want an industry? I mean, these are all things that the modeler themselves have to decide on. But in this case, I just tried to explain how this scene basically evolved. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in some kind of order. So basically, I hope that helps you guys out in trying to determine how to make a scene. The only thing I can, like I say, that I can really stress is try not to envision. Don't sit here and think that I sat here and saw this whole thing in my head. It didn't happen. I saw the 4 little buildings in my head. I laid the buildings in, did the ground coloring and stuff, and from there I added to it and added to it and added to it. And in the end, this is what we wound up with. Also, to talk about this scene is, if you ever get tired of a scene like this, change it. Don't put a scene like this on a railroad and think that it's got to stay there. I could pull any of these buildings right off of here and fill that in with no scenery whatsoever and move those buildings to somewhere else on the layout. You know, if you don't make them too permanent, you know, if you just set them in there and do your scenery, your ground scenery around them, all the stuff can be pulled right out of there and used somewhere else. So that's something to give consideration to when you're planting your buildings as well, which would be a whole nother video. But anyway, I hope that helps you guys out in scene planning. I just picked this scene because it was one of my favorites and one of the first ones on the layout, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Okay, Matt, I hope that helped you out, and I hope it helps some other people out. It's just the way this stuff comes to my head. Like I said, some people have the I don't know, like an artistic ability. I wouldn't say that I'm an artist by any means, but you got to have the ability to conceptualize something. And certainly everybody has an idea of what their railroad or what a scene or, you know, how things are going to turn out. And basically, from that point, it's just implementing that very thing and then adding to it as you go when you find out more information, more tips. So I hope that helped, Matt, and everybody come back and see us, and I hope you have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.